Welcome to Life Happens, where Texans come to protect their legacy and prepare for the second half of life. Join your host, Attorney Kim Hegwood with Hegwood Law Group, and our weekly guest as we navigate the challenges that emerge as life happens. Now here's your host, Kim Hegwood.
Good morning to our special podcast with Life Happens. Today I have an excellent special guest, Leah Stanley, who's an author of Goodnight, Sweet, A Caregiver's Long Goodbye. And so Leah's going to talk to us about caregiving. And so welcome, Leah, to the show.
Thank you so much, Kim. So good to be here.
Yeah, and so we were talking earlier, and so I know when I was taking care of my grandparents, we used private caregivers. And so during the holidays, they were all wanting to be with their families. And so we got to do a lot more caregiving, the family did at that time. Probably me and the kids specifically did a lot of that. And so during the holidays, what do you talk to caregivers about, as far as their role during the holidays, that can be helpful?
This is a tough time of the year. People struggle because this is such a family-oriented time of the year. Everyone has these Norman Rockwell type images of the cozy fireplace and everyone's sitting around and everyone's in great health and everyone's doing well. And then all of a sudden reality hits and you see that your family is not like that. You're having to deal with a loved one, as you said, that you felt a much greater burden at the holidays. People who have their loved ones in like a care home or a long-term care community, they don't deal with it on the day in and day out, but that's the way it was with me, with my grandparents. They had to go into a nursing home. My husband and I had just gotten married. We had been married less than a year when all of this went down with them, and they were both diagnosed with dementia at the same time. We were in no place in life to be able to take them in, so we had to put them in a nursing home. So while I wasn't dealing with the daily logistics of caregiving, I assure you I was hearing all about it. As you can imagine, I was getting the phone calls from the nursing home every time anything went on. So there was a lot going on. And then, of course, there was the visits, going in and talking to them. And so I had that experience of realizing the holidays are never going to be what they were, or that's how I felt at the time. I thought, it's just never going to be anything. How can I do this? What am I going to do? So when I talk with caregivers at the holidays, particularly because it can be challenging, first thing is acknowledge it. Acknowledge how tough it is. Don't try to deny it. Don't try to say, oh, well, this year's going to be different. It might be different, but it might be a negative different, because if your loved one has had a dementia or any type of cognitive impairment for any length of time, the sad part about these things is they generally go forward. They tend to get worse over time. They really don't plateau and they don't get better. So yeah, things may be different, but it may not be the good different you're looking for. So I always want to encourage caregivers, set realistic expectations. This is really, really hard. It's much more difficult to do than it seems like it ought to be. You think, well, of course, I know they're in the nursing home, or I know they've got dementia. What does that really mean? What does it look like for you going forward? And that's where a lot of people get stuck. And so they just assume everything's dreadful, everything's terrible. It doesn't have to be that way. Embrace the now. Take hold of right now and be grateful you still can talk to them. You still can see them. You can still touch their hand. You can still give them a hug. You can still see their eyes. And there's something about the look in their eyes that you can look at them and say, yeah, you're still in there. The one I love is still there. Embrace those moments.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm fortunate that, my grandparents didn't have, dementia. My grandmother had very severe osteoporosis that really was very bad towards the end. And my grandfather had strokes. So his was more physical, than mental. And but we see a lot of families. We've, my law practice has been, really geared towards, people with dementia, because the numbers are rising. So we're seeing a lot more of that, in my office, in that aspects of it. And so, so how do you, tell someone to include the dementia patient, when they don't remember past holidays, when they're not really sure why they're there, and what's going on at the time when you're trying to have that family dinner that we all so love, at the holidays.
Exactly. That was a struggle I had the Christmas before everything fell to pieces. It came down in January for me, but the Christmas right before it, when I called my grandma the way I did every Christmas, I said, hey, Merry Christmas. And she said, Christmas? It's not Christmas. I said, oh, Grandma, it is Christmas. Merry Christmas. Are you having a good day? No, sweet, it's not Christmas. There's been nothing on TV about it. I was so floored. So that was shocking. And of course, at that point, we didn't realize what the problem was. So naturally, I had all the answers. I was young and stupid. And I said, oh, Grandma, it's Christmas. Yes, it's Christmas. It's December 25th. And of course, I had to learn, as we do. We come through this ignorant valley that we have to go through. And we learn. I had to find out I couldn't argue with her. So if she had to tell me that it wasn't Christmas, then, it wasn't Christmas to her, but that was okay because I could still talk to her and I could still love her. I could still sit down and hold her hand. I could still say, hey, what'd you do today? Did you eat anything for lunch that was good? Did you have a special meal today? Same thing with my grandfather. He was not as bad as she was. They both had dementia. His was an unspecified type. Hers was specifically Alzheimer's. And so he always seemed like he was marginally better than she was, but not much, really and truly not much. So talking to either one of them, it was kind of it was like a turkey shoot. You didn't know what you were going to get. Are you really are they going to know? Are they not? Most of the time they didn't. I had to learn to meet them where they were. And that was very, very special to me to finally realize they could still feel, even though they couldn't remember.
Yeah.
And that is such a fine line for folks. A lot of times we tend to think, we look at the elderly people and we're just like, oh, they're not going to know. They might, and they probably will. And so you need to think of it in terms of they will. So they may not remember what you say. They may not remember the day it is, but they are going to remember how you made them feel. Yeah. So love on them. Look them in their eyes when you talk to them and try to meet them where they are. If they don't think it's a holiday, that's okay. You can talk about past holidays, or you can talk about what Christmas might be. Well, when Christmas gets here, what are your plans? What would you like to do? Ask them questions, usually questions further back in the past from their childhood. Those memories tend to be set, and they are the last ones to go in the cognitive world of cognition issues. Those tend to be the last things to go. So if you can get them talking about their childhood, a special Christmas, a special Thanksgiving, maybe there's a funny story that they've told that you've always kind of chuckled at, prompt them to tell that story again. And even though you've heard it 1,000 times, smile, laugh, tell them how funny it is, tell them, oh, I bet that must have been really something when that happened. And let them feel special, because that causes them to have an engagement with you. Now they are interacting with you at the level they can, and that really can help.
I think that it's very difficult for families when their loved ones are starting to decline, and they're losing the memories, and so and we see sometimes, because we always have to, you talk to people and you try to educate as many as you can. You can't argue with someone with dementia. You redirect, and so it's like arguing with a drunk. You're never going to win an argument. So it's just painful for you and them. And that's not the kind of thing that you want them to have to go through, during the day. You want everything to be very pleasant, and so, I've talked to people that, that have had dementia, and a lot of times they just like to talk about the things they do remember,
Right.
And so a lot of times it's just a matter of just kind of prompting them, or you tell them a story that is going to trigger a story for them. Hey, this is what happened with me today. What's been going on, with you, and
Right.
And so really addressing, I think, more feeling type things. How do you feel today? Things that they know they don't have to think about, so that it's not problematic. And so it's really interesting that that we're finding that it almost seems like we have to have an education on how to talk to people in such a way that we've never had to talk before, and so,
Right.
But I also find that a lot of people struggle, the caregivers struggle a lot with the decline. It seems like the more the decline, the more stress they have. And so how do you help people manage like their own emotions so they can stay positive and upbeat and things like that.
This funnels into the whole concept of self-care for the caregiver. And that sometimes it's like caregivers hear those words and they're just like, okay, stop, just stop, because that is such a difficult area.
Yeah.
The idea is that if you're not at the peak of your game, there's really no way you're going to be able to help your loved one. And it's like on the airplane, back when we all used to travel places, when we would go places, and the flight attendants told us over and over, if you need the air mask, if it drops down, put yours on first, then help the person sitting with you. So if you're not to say it lightly, if you're not on your A game, you're not going to be able to do very much with the person that you're working with. And that's key. So keep yourself rested, keep yourself with exercise, keep yourself with frequent breaks, and take time away. Don't just immerse in this and stay there. One of the things that used to happen, my grandma would tell me that she had just put her little son to bed. Well, guess what? Her one and only son was my father.
Yeah.
And so she would be telling his daughter that clearly he had to be an adult to have a daughter. She would be telling me, oh, I just put little Ray to bed. And, at first, the first time she said it, I was so floored. I was just like, no, you didn't. Wait, Grandma, what? I was so floored and stunned. I didn't know what to do. It took time, and it took working with therapists, working with the folks in the nursing home that were able to give me a really, like you said, a first-class education about here's something you can do. Just don't argue, even when she's telling you something that is utter nonsense. So I learned when she would tell me, I just put little Ray to bed, and I would just hold her hand and I would just say, I'm glad you were able to do that. That's really special. It's really sweet to put your child to bed, isn't it? And yes, it is. And that way, everything was okay. Her feelings were spared, because a lot of times, when we call these loved ones of ours out, people we care about, we call them out. No, that's not right. You embarrass them. And for that fleeting moment, they realize, oh, Lord, I've made a mistake again. Oh, no, what's happening to me? And then, of course, that goes away too. Thank God that doesn't stay with them. But for that moment, they feel that humiliation, and we never want to do that. We always want to be as loving as we can and supportive, and let them know, because clearly this is not something that they're doing on purpose. This is not something they can help. And it is the nature of the condition they have. It is the nature of dementia, and whatever type dementia, there's a bazillion different types.
Yeah.
The nature of it is that this is for real for them. And what they're telling you at this moment is what's real to them. So I always encourage people, no matter what they say, just, I'm glad. Oh, that sounds good. I'm glad you did. And redirecting, as you mentioned, Kim, is just so crucial, because you've got to be able to say, oh, I want my grandfather, for example, would say, oh, I want to go home. Where are my keys? Leah, give me my keys. And I would say, oh, at first I was like, I can't give you your keys. And I would sit there panicked thinking, I don't know what to do. I was finally told therapeutic lying is the greatest thing ever, because
Yes.
you're not lying to them to deceive. You're not up to something. You're
Yeah.
telling them something that you're trying to keep the peace. You're trying to keep everything calm. So my grandfather would look at me and say, where are my keys, Leah? I want to go home, Leah. Where are my keys? I've got to get my car. And I would say, Grandpa, they're over here. Let me go get them. Hey, have you had lunch today? What'd you have? Or have you been outside? It's a gorgeous day outside today. Why don't we go look in the courtyard and see how things are doing out there? And it would work. And I would always be amazed, like, he bought that, well, yeah, again, in that state of cognitive decline. So that's why, again, there's a key factor here. Denial is bad news. You really get through the denial as quickly as possible. I think everybody goes through it when you first are acquainted with the fact that your loved one has a form of dementia, or even any kind of a sickness. There's like that stage of denial that you go through. Try to move through quickly if possible. Try to come to that place of acceptance. And it's harder than I'm making it sound. I don't mean to undermine, I'm not trying to make it oversimplified, but truthfully, work through this as quickly as you can, because if you stay in denial, then your loved one is not going to get the help they need. And that's going to be bad news. and then you're going to be stuck living with it. It's just, it's like a domino effect. It just, one thing knocks over, scores of other dominoes. So that is really important.
I think too, though, that a lot of times, especially with married couples, they live with each other every day. So they kind of compensate for the person without realizing they're compensating for the person. So, sometimes it takes holidays when the family comes in who's not around every day to say, oh, wow, there's something going on. So a lot of times the holidays are when we find that people really realize that there's something going on with the parents, because they talk to them 5-10 minutes, a couple of times a week, and you can, I hate to use the word fake, but you can fake those phone calls, or at least be enough to say, because most people say, hey, how's your day? I do that to my daughter. She calls me on her way home from picking up my grandson. How's your day today? It's like a standard, kind of thing. Anything, how's work going? Just the same normal things that you just kind of have general chit chat with. And so it really is, for us, I think it's really, as a parent, is really making sure you spend time, and really talk a little longer sometimes in order to really make sure that, that parents, or grandparents or whoever it is may be, doing better. And so I think one of the things too that came to mind was something that I read was, discussing, how the importance of now, providing care. And so can you kind of talk to our listeners a little bit more about that?
Surely. That is so important. Again, if you're in denial, you're not in the now. You're in some past time when things were much, much better. And so that's bad news. Again, people miss out on care that they can have, and they miss out on things that later they look back and think, oh, I wish I had understood. My own case was, I was trapped in the past with my grandparents, because my grandparents lived about 2.5 hours away from me. And it was just, we had such a great relationship. I would go over there. We wrote letters. I called. So we had good contact, good enough contact that I could tell something was wrong. But guess what? I didn't know what to do with it. I had no idea. I was so ignorant. And it really was ignorance. It wasn't like trying to be crazy about it. Like, oh, I wasn't consciously trying to deny anything. I was young and I was getting married, and I was at a completely different stage in my life. And I was all my grandparents had at that point. And I visited, I talked, but I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand there was an actual condition going on. So I would hear my grandma say these weird things. And I was just like, oh, Grandma, I knew that. You told me that last time. Yeah, you've mentioned that 3 or 4 times, Grandma. And I wasn't trying to be hateful. In my brain, I was going back to the past when you could talk to her and tell her things. And she was like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand. Well, it got to a point where she wasn't paying her bills, her phone bill, and her taxes. And then she and my grandfather got in the car and drove away. And they were gone for 4 days. And they turned up 2 hours from their home. The passenger side of the car was wrecked, and it was below freezing temperatures. So the sheriff had to take them back home. And their neighbor called me and said, you need to get up here. Well, at that point, there was no more trying to live in the past. I had to come into the now, like immediately. And we had to get them to the doctor, get them seen about. They were diagnosed. And all of a sudden it was like, oh my, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
So I actually just wrote a blog post about this on my website, leahstanley.com. And I took a fair amount of time discussing the idea that people get caught up in what they get caught up in. And they, for whatever reason, they don't notice, don't realize, don't understand. My thing, I just didn't understand that it was a serious situation. I thought, oh, they're just getting older. Well, they were getting older, but there was more to it than that. So what I'm encouraging folks to do is, by being in the now, if you start to suspect, if grandma or mom or dad or uncle, whoever it is, starts to talk repetitively, if you start seeing strange things taking place, if you become aware that there are kind of dents and dings that are appearing in the car that weren't there before, and they can't really explain it, or they're getting lost in familiar places, see, that's in the now. That's what's happening right now. And I would encourage you, address it now before something unfortunate takes place, and I don't mean that funny, there are car accidents that happen all the time. You can speak to the legality of this. The dementia patient driving a car when they know the spouse or the kids or whoever knows that mom or dad's been diagnosed with dementia, and they go driving the car anyway, and they're in an accident. Man, you are talking about, and I don't have to tell you, the attorney, that you're talking about a legal, ugly, ugly mess that can result from that. So by being present in the now, hopefully those types of things can be avoided. It's not going to be easy. And that's crucial. It's not going to be easy. It's not easy having those conversations. When I had to look at my grandfather and say, you can't leave, I can't give you the keys, it did not go well.
No.
Freaked out. I mean, he did. At one point, he got so mad at me, and he was never like this before. But he literally grabbed me by the arm and shook me like I was a child and demanded, "Where are my keys?" I had never seen any behavior like that in my life out of him. So, I mean, you have to brace for it. You know, it's brace for impact, because it's not easy, but better to deal with it early than to just, do this and look away and then something unfortunate happens. And then you've missed out on valuable time too. Valuable time that you can be treasuring every moment with them. And that's key.
Yeah. I have a lot of clients, the kids are in and they're trying, and they don't want to have the conversation. There's like, well, they're not going to let me have the keys, or, I take the keys, but they have the locksmith come out, and give them a new set, and so we went as far with one of my clients to, he, I guess, took the distributor cap off or whatever. It was a little older car. Had a friend with a tow truck come pick it up so he could see it going to the mechanics, and then drove it down the street away from the house, and then took it back off the truck, and the client left and went and picked it up, and basically just took it home because he knew, he knew dad wasn't going to see it, and so, but he needed to do that in order to get it out without a fight, without an argument, without somebody saying, I'm going to drive no matter what. And so my grandmother probably drove way past the time, that she could. And so luckily she drove from the house to the grocery store and the house to the pharmacy, and just like back roads. So as she got older, she kind of knew. She'd been in a few accidents. I used to laugh and tell people she used to stop at green lights and run red, and so I would pick her up and I'd say, oh, I got the kids in the car, so you need to get in the car with me. Let me drive. It's just too difficult to swap the car seats out, and things like that. So I drove her everywhere I could. And so when the kids were little, because I was like, yeah, I'm not getting behind the wheel with you again. It was too traumatic.
Smart,
not doing it.
Smart choice.
And so definitely not doing it. And so let's just, kind of close the show. It's like we always talk about the importance of self-care, and so especially with caregiving and everything. So what do you have for listeners today when it comes to the importance of self-care?
Well, how crucial it is. This is probably one of the most important areas, and I cannot oversell this. I talk a lot about this on social media. I've done blog posts about it. You have to be on your A game if you're going to provide care for the one you love. Because if you burn out, who's going to take care of you and who's going to take care of them? Now, again, we're almost making this sound like a math equation. 2 + 2 is going to equal 4. And now we've solved that problem, so we can move on. Again, real life, it's not that easy. I have talked to caregivers. I do conferences. I have spoken to groups at different places. Invariably, caregivers will come up to me and they will I've had people embrace me and they won't let go. And so it's just like, you need somebody to pour something into you. You just are desperate for something. You're hungry for somebody to help you. And these caregivers will look at me and they'll say, there is no one else. And that's ugly when you've got a situation where the caregiver's the only one. In cases like that, I always urge you, look into what Medicare will pay for your loved one to have home health care, to have someone come in and help you out, even if it's just an hour or two a week.
Yeah.
someone can come in perhaps from your church. I always urge people, that is one of the greatest places to look, is people in your own church. There are invariably volunteers. When my dad had prostate cancer and he passed away. But before he did, he was on hospice. And my poor mom was there by herself trying to help him out. She wound up contacting people through church and people that through the hospice organization, actually, who provided her care, because the poor woman could not go to the grocery. She could not run to the store for anything. And at the time she was living out of town. I was living in Houston. She was in Memphis, Tennessee. And it wasn't like I could just pop up there, so she could run to the grocery, which of course, if I'd been in town would have worked fine. But as it was, she had no one. So look to church organizations. I know here in the Houston area, Care Partners, they do amazing work, and they've got all manner of gathering place things, and they've got people, volunteers that work with their staff. And man, tap that resource. That's what I encourage you to do. You have to be creative, you have to look for it, but there are places, and you may not get help 40 hours a week. Okay. Again, let's be realistic and look in the now. What kind of help can you get? And I'll tell you what, don't be afraid to ask family to help either. Family, sometimes I've had caregivers say, well, I've got a brother and I've got somebody over here, and they don't lift a finger to help. Call on them and say, hey, I need some help. Can you help me? Is there something you can do? And sometimes we have to be, as caregivers, we almost have to be bulldozers. We have to say, you know what? I love you. It's time for you to step up and help me. And I know everybody's thinking, well, that sounds easier said than done. Sometimes we have to do, as caregivers, I know I had to do just some ugly stuff that I didn't want to do, and I felt so ill-equipped to do. But the more I stepped out and the more I raised the flag and said, okay, I've got to have some help here, people would rally around. Somewhere I would find someone who could help me, be it someone at the nursing home, a therapist, people from church that would go in and visit my grandparents. But they're not going to know if you don't raise the flag. So that's why I urge you, please reach out for help. And there is nothing wrong with taking your friend and going to Starbucks or the coffee shop somewhere and having a cup of coffee and just sitting down and taking a breather. That is crucial, and it will help so much.
So Leah, your website looks like it's leahstanley.com, just how it sounds, right?
Yep,
and,
exactly.
So people can, do they order your book from leahstanley.com?
Yes, absolutely. There's a link on there. It'll take you to the Amazon page. You can also go directly to Amazon. It's on Barnes & Noble. It's on various other Goodreads sites, different things like that. So you can find it all at the website.
Perfect. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on today. So it's all good information. And just wanted to thank you immensely. And if you need anything ever, just let me know. And I'm sure you'll be back on the show again soon.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's been a pleasure to be here.
All right. Thanks, hon.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Life Happens with Kim Hegwood. Be sure to tune in every Thursday at 10 a.m. wherever you listen to your podcast as we navigate through the challenges that emerge as life happens. The content of this podcast does not establish an attorney-client relationship or constitute attorney-client privilege, legal, medical, financial, or any other professional advice.